Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Willits. Here. Whittings.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. The first topic on our agenda today is planning for the Shoreline District, and we've got Nikki Hellenkamp with us, and also Hannah, and let's see, Maureen is here, and Lana and Casey, quite a few members of our team. I just want to say a couple things as we kick this off. I've asked Nikki to come and have a discussion today about our next steps for planning in this area. And in terms of planning, I want to be clear that we're not suggesting that we redo the PDS-esque planning of looking at roads and the Greenbelt and all those other pieces, but instead that in the coming months and years, recognizing that for over a decade, this has been an area where services are provided, and they will continue to be provided, that we need to do our best to align our departments internally in terms of service provision and investments in the area, and then to pull together stakeholders, whether it be residents, those experiencing homelessness or providing services to those experiencing homelessness, and property owners, to have a discussion about how we all live together, work together, provide service together in effective ways so that we can both take care of those who need service and are there for service and create opportunity in the long run within this part of our city. You know, for so long, I believe that, you know, some of the first conversations, at least that I was part of related to this district, was way back in 2011. So it's been 11 years, and I know it's been longer than that. And I believe that we can very much do this differently than other communities have if we come to it with our values of, with the value of caring for folks as Boiseans always do, the belief that we can do things differently, and that together in partnership we'll make decisions, support folks, and create a path forward for investment in this neighborhood. If we continue to do what, or try to replicate what others have done, continue to do what's been done in this district, in this neighborhood for over a decade, we won't get where any of us wants to get. And so it's my expectation that this is the first of many conversations, both with the council and the community, about what can and will be done together in this part of really important part of our city and downtown. And then we would expect to have internal meetings with staff for alignment, and then external meetings with stakeholders that will start in the coming weeks. And then I would expect would continue as we at the same time make investments in this neighborhood. With that, Nikki, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, members of council. For the record, I'm Nikki Olivier Hellenkamp with the Mayor's Office, here with you to talk about planning for the Shoreline District. So as the Mayor mentioned, in recent years, the Shoreline District has been of significant interest to the city of Boise and our partners, including in the realms of economic development, housing development, including the planned affordable housing to be developed on the site of Fire Station 5, transportation, public safety, and ensuring that services there are scaled for the level of need that exists for people experiencing homelessness. I'm going to talk with you today about some of the work that's been in progress, and I'll close out with some short-term recommendations and our planned outreach efforts for the long term. In terms of background, the Shoreline District is home to local businesses, service providers, people experiencing homelessness, healthcare providers, homeowners, and renters. The City of Boise and community partners, including CCDC and Our Path Home, have been working closely on ensuring that this area serves the people who live, work, and recreate there. Our goal and next steps are to continue to work with stakeholders and residents to address immediate needs and to create a long-term plan for the area. So just to give us, to sort of physically orient us in space, this is just a map of kind of the general area. It's not the last map you'll see in this presentation, so don't feel like you have to memorize it, but that's the gist of where we're talking about. So in terms of highlighting some of the work in progress, so CCDC back in 2019 established the Shoreline Urban Renewal District. This district will be active for 20 years. And in 2021, they looked specifically at this small piece of that urban renewal district with a 17th Street reinvestment study. That study, the folks who participated in it came out with recommendations around short-term investments such as lighting and streetscape improvements. Since then, 5 new streetlights have been added to that 17th Street area, and there are additional investments planned in the near term in terms of lighting and addressing sidewalk gaps. And then there were also some big picture recommendations, for example, supporting redevelopments that contribute to tax increment increases there, given that it is now an urban renewal district. There also was a CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design report done in 2020 by the Boise Police Department that came out that had some similar recommendations. So while we do know that change is happening in this area and in Boise as a whole, there are many things that we expect to remain the same. People experiencing homelessness will continue to access vital services on this corridor, even with the relocation of Interfaith, which is tentatively estimated for March of 2024. And this map doesn't have all of the little flags that I would like it to have, I see now. So I will tell you which agencies you would see flagged in red if this had been the version that I looked at earlier. Sorry about that. So some of the agencies who are right here in this corridor are Catch, Corpus Christi, River of Life. There are healthcare providers, Terry Riley and Access Behavioral Health. We also have the Boise Public Library, emergency services providers. And all of these are located in this area and continuing to invest in service provision here. Catch, for example, is currently undergoing a $1.3 million remodel on their building, which was funded through City of Boise CDBG funds. So while we know that this will continue to be an area where people seek and receive services, we also know that services and facilities in this neighborhood for those experiencing homelessness are inadequate. This has negative impacts for individuals who are not being adequately served and for the surrounding neighborhood. So this is my illustrative example, because I think sometimes when we say services and facilities, that can feel vague. And what are we even talking about here? So simple example, the lack of sufficient restroom access has a clear negative impact on anyone living in this area who does not have reliable access to a restroom and who's left with the option of seeking to use limited private facilities or using public spaces. This also creates a negative neighborhood impact in the form of ongoing sanitation and cleanliness issues for commercial and residential neighbors, as well as exacerbating unhealthy conditions for people experiencing homelessness in highly used service corridors. So in this example, we want to really acknowledge that when we do not provide, we as a community do not provide sufficient services and facilities in this area, it has a negative impact on people themselves who need those services, and it has a negative impact on the neighborhood as a whole. So as we look toward the future, we know that providing services to people who need them will also have a positive impact on the neighborhood and help us to avoid some of those impacts that result from us failing to provide those services. Our Path Home has done outreach with people experiencing homelessness and service providers in the past months to surface needs and identify goals. And some of the short-term needs and goals identified through that outreach include restroom facilities, to the example I just gave. So adding 4 porta potties to the area, trash collection. So looking at dumpster capacity and making sure that there is a place for trash to go, addressing issues around alleyway access by making sure that folks are aware of where it's okay to park and not, and how to make sure that there is access, and daytime services space, which I'll go into more detail on in a minute. You'll notice that these recommendations cover much of the same ground that we've heard concerns around from other stakeholders in the area, and I think that that is worth noting. So on the daytime services space, just to orient us, we have, I'm going to attempt to use the mouse here. We'll see if it works. Over here, we've got Corpus Christi, which currently provides daytime services, including meals, showers, laundry, mail services, and computer access with capacity for 80 people, which is insufficient to the level of need, given that we know that hundreds of people access services on this corridor on a daily basis. Without additional indoor daytime space, people seeking services will continue to be outside in this area. In addition, service providers have been renting space at the Phoenix building, located over here at 511 South Americana, for almost a year to provide daytime services. As you'll remember, council approved a purchase and sale agreement in August to acquire this site. As I mentioned, this property has been rented by service providers for almost a year to provide daytime services, particularly as a warming space during the winter and a cooling space in the summer. And to reiterate, acquiring this property is part of a short-term approach, which won't address or solve the larger challenge. We know that continued outreach to all stakeholders in the shoreline area will be necessary for long-term planning efforts. So on the question of how to ensure that the various community members who live, work, recreate, get healthcare, and access services here are able to do so, this outreach will build on previous and existing planning efforts that were already mentioned, with additional conversations to be planned in the coming weeks, working to bring together landowners, business owners, renters, and homeowners to build on individual conversations that have been happening for years. To the mayor's point, none of these issues are new. And so really working to build on work that's already been done on those individual conversations and bringing folks together is something that we'll be working toward. The mayor also mentioned internal alignment. So really looking at how we bring together internal City of Boise departments, including police, fire, library, community engagement, public works, and others, so that all of those departments are working collaboratively to resource the most efficient public service delivery possible. And in addition, bringing together conversations with other stakeholder agencies like CCDC, ACHD, and Ada County. And just to reiterate one more time that this is not the first time this conversation has been had, and we're really going to be working toward building on the conversations that have historically been going on, with the goal of all of these stakeholder conversations supporting the advancement of the shoreline area and helping to inform ongoing planning efforts. And with that, happy to stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much, Nikki. I have a question about the Phoenix building. So you said that it's been used as daytime services for about the past year. Do you have any insight on what the impact of that facility having some daytime use was on the surrounding neighborhood?
I'm Madam Mayor, Council Member. I'm going to turn to Casey and Maureen to see whether either of them have something they'd like to share on that.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Woodings. I don't know that we have a great answer about the surrounding neighborhood impact. What we can tell you is when it was used exclusively as a warming base during the winter, we had more than 400 unique individuals access that service for warming during the day. Currently, Catch is using that building to operate their Connect and outreach programs, which are exclusively focused on performing housing assessments to begin the process of connecting individuals to a housing strategy. This particular site has increased the number of hours that they're able to operate day in proximity to those services. It's hard to answer what the impact on the surrounding area has been because access to this building has not meaningfully addressed restrooms when restrooms have not otherwise been present. So previously Interfaith Sanctuary was providing restrooms in form of porta potty on the back end of their property, which they left the gate open for, that was funded through ESGCV funding from IHFA. In that time when those restroom facilities were open, there was a decreased issue with public use of space for restrooms. Those have not been available for quite a while. So we haven't necessarily measured the direct impact. And I think that's what Nikki is talking about in the shifting of planning that gets more comprehensive about ripple effects of services that are provided to positively impact the neighborhood.
Madam Mayor, just one follow-up. So if the city were to then have that space, what would the level of service look like for some of those things that Nikki talked about? So for restroom facilities and some of those needs that are identified.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, the short-term strategy for the city of Boise today is 4 porta potties that would be located on the right side of the Phoenix building. So we would feel comfortable about our ability to do that if we purchased the building. Not quite sure if that building owner would allow us to place restroom facilities on the alleyway if we did not acquire the building. The dumpster strategy is also related to placing those dumpsters on the side of the Phoenix building, because that's what Republic Services has estimated is necessary for emergency access for vehicles like fire trucks and police cars to be able to access the actual facility need to be located on the side of that building. We're able to make those moves now as Catch is leasing the building, but I'm not sure what the future of a Catch lease and interface sanctuary lease or the property owner's interest would be if we don't acquire the building. So for those short-term solutions, the building is is an integral part of those short-term solution designs. I'm not quite sure when we scan out to a larger long-term question of how will we provide adequate restroom facilities in this neighborhood if the Phoenix building acquisition by the city of Boise enhances our ability to actually impact the footprint in a different way. I'm not sure.
I just want to ask the council member a clarifying question. Are you asking about what the intended use of the Phoenix building would be were the city to close on this acquisition? And then how would that impact the services that are provided in this area?
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah, so
like,
not the
what would
outs
the impact
external things, but having this building, what is the intended use and the impact, as we've discussed, both in ability to provide services to those who need it and to alleviate the impact on the neighborhood?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Wooding, sorry about my misinterpretation of the question. The plan for the building is to remain as flexible as possible within the provision of expanded daytime services. So right now, our most urgent need as we're approaching winter months, this would give us the ability to have a physical space to provide additional warming space. Currently, as you heard from Nikki, have Corpus Christi, which has a fire capacity of 80 individuals versus the hundreds of folks who are in this area every day. So it would increase our ability to bring those folks inside, which one, provides them with direct restroom access by utilization of a building. 2, provides them daytime space that decreases the number of emergency services response calls that we can expect within a neighborhood because they're not exposed to dangerous winter elements by nature of being inside during the day between the times that the shelter closes in the morning and then reopens in the afternoon. Over the long term, the use of this space is going to be focused around what are the daytime needs, which could include our connect and outreach programs, which increase our ability to assess people and their housing needs and move them more quickly into permanent housing, focusing on the most vulnerable people. And when we say the most vulnerable, that means a hyper focus on people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, meaning that they're likely to be in this alleyway, both in the daytime and overnight, and are likely to have at least one disabling condition, which can include severe and persistent mental illness. So by giving us a physical ability that increases the impact of those services, we're able to more readily connect those folks to long-term housing solutions quickly. And then we've also been talking with the Boise Police Department at biweekly meetings between service providers and the Boise Police about alleyway access being in part due to personal belongings that are currently stored in the alleyway. Part of what the Phoenix allows us to do is have a physical footprint to actually explore long-term self-managed storage possibilities that's implemented in other cities successfully, so that instead of folks storing personal belongings on alleyway, which obstructs emergency access, they're able to store those in locked boxes that are accessible through program rules.
I think what this conversation and this neighborhood needs is both the short-term interventions, some of which we just touched on, but really the long-term strategies for investment, recognizing the nature of support services that will continue to be provided here, and the economic opportunity expectations and desires that the city has and the community has. So some of the many of the topics, some of which even Casey just brought up, they're the short-term solutions, but ultimately what's important is the long-term investment in ensuring, one, that we can provide services as expected, but 2, that we are able to alleviate some of the impact of service provision. And then 3, I think a really important part of this in terms of bringing folks together to talk about this and to set some expectations and to set accountability and agreements is that in doing this, the city's committing to bring other partners, public agencies to the table to make investments alongside us. The city is committed to having the conversations we've got to have with, say, the highway district and the county. And then internally to make sure that we have the presence we must have, ought to have, and really everyone deserves in this area, while at the same time talking with landowners and making clear the agreements and expectations we have and they have from their end and we have on them from us in terms of accountability and living together. So there's both the piece of property, but ultimately the corridor and the neighborhood that this planning process needs to look at, because there's so much more going on here than just one building, one door that happens to be where you enter in for particular services.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So last year, I know that Boise Mutual Aid tagged myself, Councilman Halliburton, and the mayor when the weather got scarily dangerous and extreme. And I believe we went ahead and arranged for hotel vouchers to make sure that folks had access to shelter when the temperature dropped really low. Is that a service that's going to be made available through this?
On that piece, this long-term planning and the potential service that would be provided within a building is separate from the voucher program that the city continues to be involved with.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I only bring that up because I noticed that Boise Mutual Aid is making posts asking folks to donate items so that people can have what they need to survive out of doors. And I know we're not yet to that point yet, but folks are already starting to take those measures. So I just want to make sure that that's something that we're aware of.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for level setting kind of what's there now and the next steps. We've gotten some communication from constituents on this. I'm curious to ensure that those conversations are the most fruitful they can be. How will the invitations be issued to this community conversation, and who's going to be on the list? So give us some logistics information behind that.
Madam Mayor, council member, thanks for the question. And I will be very honest and say, I don't have a list and I don't have the logistics. And part of the reason for that is that we want to make sure that as we are looking at those three groups kind of in the middle bullet, we are thinking as holistically as we can and thinking about this only as the beginning of the outreach conversation and not the end all be all. So this is what we're hoping to and planning to have be a much longer term process. This is kind of phase one. We know that we need to have this conversation with these groups. So in terms of the folks who would be engaged from the sort of business owner, landowner, renter, and homeowner side, there is a list that was used by CCDC for the 17th Street reinvestment corridor study. So those folks have previously been engaged in that conversation. So that would certainly be one of our starting places. And then really looking at the rest of that neighborhood in terms of what the outreach needs to look like. So apologies for not having that for you today, but your brain is exactly where our brains are in terms of those next steps.
And Mayor, can I have a
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in and say PDS has lists. Our neighborhood outreach team has lists. We've got the list that she's referenced. Our intention is that we reach out and invite landowners, those who live in the area, the organizations that are providing services in the area, to make sure that we've got, it's folks willing to give them the opportunity to come to the table. And then ultimately it's on them to agree to come to the table and work with us.
Sure. So what I'll do to help, do my part is anyone that has emailed me, I'll make sure that you have their contact information so that they can have an opportunity to attend. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Nikki, I think what I'm hearing, as we went through the hearing on interfaith sanctuary, I think a lot of us learned a lot about the services that have been lacking for this community for a while. And I think what I'm hearing is that this is an attempt to understand the community that's going to still be in this area. What are the services that won't be available otherwise? And while we can't fill all of those needs, at least we can understand what they are and have some plan for how we're going to try to address them. Is that what I think I'm hearing?
Madam Mayor, Council President, yes, that's very much what you're hearing.
Thank you. I think to me, that's really an important piece that, it's really hard to hold people accountable if there isn't a plan A, and if whatever plan or resources you have are lacking in what's needed. And so at least this way we'll know what we do need and whether or not we can meet those needs. And if not, then we can begin looking for resources to do that. Thank you.
All right, Nikki, thank you very much. Thanks, Casey, also. Next up, Chief Niemeyer to talk with us about Fire Station 13. That will be located on the great piece of property on State Street that has a beautiful sign.
It does have a beautiful
Letting our
sign.
neighbors know that a fire station truly is coming to this neighborhood.
It is, we promise. We've got the sign to prove it. Let me see if I can work technology. If not, I might have to ask Sean to come up and there we go. Perfect. You can tell I'm not normally the one working technology. Okay, yes, Madam Mayor, Council, good to see you again this afternoon. Happy to talk about what we believe is a really positive project for our city and predominantly for the Northwest residents. As I look back, it was just a little over 22 months ago that you all gave me this great opportunity to be your fire chief. And it was a conversation with the mayor, getting priorities. And one of those priorities was get service delivery to the Northwest neighborhood. And so we took that on. Just to do a quick refresh on the background and how we got to where we are today. Chief Gervais and I started right away and we looked at the previous site located, identified for the fire station that was on Gary Lane. We quickly identified that was not the right location to provide the best coverage to the entire Northwest. So we came back, we worked with our GIS folks, our data folks. We identified Bogart as kind of that ideal location somewhere near State Street. And it just so happened that there was land available at the corner of State and Bogart. And so we entered into discussions with that landowner. We did do the property purchase in December of 2021. And yes, Mayor, we put a sign in the ground as soon as it thawed out. If you remember, that was during the freeze. So we put a sign in to make sure that that neighborhood knew that we were coming, that we were committed to providing service to them. We procured an architect in March of 2022 for that conceptual development, and then a construction manager procured in August of 2022. And so I do have Sean Wilson here with me today, who's going to kind of jump in the middle of this quick presentation to give some more of the finer details. I just want to point out too, we have Jody here from the police department. We think what we're doing here on this station is offering some space and a touchdown space for the police department. And we think this is a model for the future, quite honestly, where you'll have fire and police in the same building, providing services out of that same building. We think that's great for the community. We think it's a great partnership. It puts us even closer to one another and working together, our firefighters and police officers working together. So we believe this model is really a model towards the future of growth as well. So from the fire department side, we're building capacity for up to 6 crew members. Initially, this station is going to have a fire engine in it and a brush truck because of the foothills and the foothills response. We have built that out for up to 4 crew members for the fire department, but we've also been in conversations with Ada County paramedics. And there's a possibility in the future you could see an ambulance in that station as well. So we want to make sure we build the station now. It's the cheapest time to build as far as building out capacity goes as opposed to remodels. So making sure that we have this station built for the future as well, we think is a really smart move. And then on the PD side, there will be a touchdown site for 4+ officers where they can come in, do reports, meet with the community, and then also engage with our firefighters in some common space that Sean will go over as far as the floor plan goes. So excited about capacity, not only for today, but for the future as well. Quick overview, and that is a picture of our sign that is in the ground, where we're at Bogart and State Street. So a very well-controlled intersection. That was kind of one of our criteria on the fire department side, is that we could hit an intersection that we can control. So we have safe passage out and the community has safe passage around us. And so this is a nice controlled intersection. And then as far as service coverage area, I mentioned with this location, we can completely cover this far northwest portion of our response area. We believe that's the best benefit to the citizens and to the community at large by putting the station here. So that is just a coverage map. You can see we can get up here into Siemens Gulch. The only reason you see this in white here is there's simply no roads there. As the roadways expand out, we'll be able to cover any growth here that occurs north of Hill Road. So status since the land purchase, and I think this is where I'm going to hand it off to Sean, and then he'll cover the rest of this, and we'll cover any questions you might have at the end.
So once the mayor, council members, once we purchased the land, we started launching discovery and planning studies right away. So geotech, which is just kind of the soils condition, groundwater monitoring, surveyed the site. We built a concept sort of feasibility study looking at entitlements and permits, variances, setbacks, all the restrictions for the site. And currently finalizing the schematic design. The site is a little unique. And there's pretty good site constraints. We have an open canal running through the south portion of the site, ITD on one border, ACHD on another. The development to the east of us, they're currently in design process, so we're trying to coordinate with them as well. We have a curb cut on North Bogart Lane, so it's a single point of site access. And we're looking for a variance with it because it actually doesn't meet setback requirements. And then we're proposing a new curb cut just for the fire engines onto Bogart Lane. We have really shallow groundwater, and we do have some deed restrictions on the site. So it's public safety with some other minor municipal functions. So this is the site plan. On the left side of the site, there's Bogart Lane. We're trying to do the best we can to front Bogart and State Street with the site plan. That was the goal. On the east side of the site, we have an area called undesignated space. So what we're trying to do is anchor the fire and police site first, and then we'll work with other departments to find other uses on the east side of the site. From a floor plan perspective, we really did focus on having fire and police be able to work together. So we have like a common workout area. We have similar workstations next to each other, good access for police to the kitchen and other things that fire typically use. So we went out of our way to try to definitely make it a public safety building. This is a rendering looking at the corner of Bogart and State Street. I don't know if anybody remembers Roman numerals on the art piece in the front, but the concept itself, this is the direction we're headed. There will be tweaks on it since we're still working with entitlements and other things. We're still doing cost estimating, some other items like that on the site. So maybe some value engineering, those types of things, but this is the direction the concept's headed. And just a couple other aerials of the site. I will point out just a couple features. We tried to bring the height of the structure up as much as we could, just because it is urban frontage, and trying to make it taller. So next steps, we're in the middle of cost estimating. I wouldn't say it's feasibility of the concept. It's more of, do we have the budget for this? Can we have this direction? Or do we have to trim it back? Detailed schedule, working out a schedule. The construction market still has a lot of challenges right now. So we're trying to work through that. Proceeding with final design. So on consent agenda, there's a contract for the final design for the project. And then additional activities we're working through, potentially some pre-procurement phases in the spring and summer. We might have to start ordering electrical equipment early, those types of things, just to meet schedule. And then, like I mentioned, we're still looking for other opportunities on the east side of the site. So working with other departments, for example, parks, we talked to them and, hey, how does this fit into like a 10-minute walk? Can you bring a lot of people in here? But there could be other opportunities for sure. Targeting site construction start late this year, but it really kind of depends on that detailed schedule and early procurement. But we are hoping to break ground this year. With that,
Madam Mayor.
for questions.
Thank you, Chief Niemeyer and Sean. it was really great to see the fire station pulled up to both streets. I initially had envisioned it for sure being pulled up to State, but it's great that it's really facing both. So that's nice. I'm noticing in these drawings that the canal is still there. And I know that CCDC in the State Street plan had envisioned covering the canal in a lot of places. So I'm curious what kind of conversations have happened in that direction.
Not a ton. We did talk to ITD and it's not on their master plan, at least in their 10 or 20. It's like a ways out. And then we did put it on CCDC's radar with the new UID out there, but we haven't met to see, where they're at. I think they're just getting that one up to speed. So
Okay.
Future conversations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Looks great.
Thanks.
Mayor. I know that the canal on the south side is a constraint. It's also a corner where ACHD or where VRT is working with both ACHD and ITD on a bus facility. And right now they've sort of identified the far side of the corner. But I think it would be helpful if we at least make sure that they know that they could work with us on this side if needed.
Yeah, we did reach, Madam Mayor, Councilman, we did reach out to, PDS. We're coordinating with their planning since they're coordinating with VRT, so they know this is on the radar. I will say the building's back far enough too, where there's enough still available if this ever needed to be an opportunity for a stop. But yeah, they did mention the northwest corner is their focus.
Thank you. And then I know that these are preliminary. They're showing on the site, on the rendering, some trees up by the building, but no trees in the parkway between the sidewalk and the street. And just want to make sure that we're aware of the opportunity to plant big trees there as well, and the difference they could make in the heat gain and the cooling in the building.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember, yeah, we're also looking at wayfinding because it kind of has two front doors because people are coming from State Street side, but of course the crew's coming in from the backside, so there'll be some wayfinding and other things out there. I did have some initial conversations with the canal company. Of course they're not too fond of trees to the canal, so we'll just have to navigate within those constraints, but focus on that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, welcome back, Bree, for an update on Valley Regional Transit State Street work. And then we've got Stephen Hunt from Valley Regional Transit with us as well.
Mayor, council members, over the last year, our transportation team has provided you several updates on all the exciting work on the State Street corridor. And VRT has been continuing to advance the transit-related piece of this. So before you today, Stephen is going to share the results of a recently completed transit operational analysis study. This study was really important to review the different lane types for State Street and how transit works within regular traffic and the type of priority treatment that it could receive. So here to share those results with you is VRT's Chief Development Officer, Stephen Hunt.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Stephen Hunt, Valley Regional Transit. And as mentioned, my objective today is just to go over the State Street Transit operational analysis, what the objectives of that study were, and share with you the findings. So to begin, the objectives of the State Street Transit operational analysis, were to review the HOV designation on State Street, which was part of the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan, the TTOP, which envisioned a 7-lane cross section with a raised median, 2 lanes of general purpose travel in each direction, and an HOV lane in each direction, with pullouts on the outside of those HOV lanes. And so as we looked to implement that, that vision, there were a couple of questions that came up, namely, one of them is the legal prohibitions on HOV lanes, which has kept the project from advancing in terms of design and construction, and also the impact that bus pullouts had both on the land use side, just the amount of pavement, the additional pavement that would be needed for the pullouts, and the impacts on transit that would have. So what we scoped with the transit operational analysis was to review the function of the HOV lane and the bus pullouts and find if there were different kinds of treatments that we could use on the corridor that still performed similar for general purpose travel and transit on the State Street corridor as envisioned by the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan. It also went one step further to identify a whole portfolio of projects of what could we do in the short term to advance the individual transit improvements that need to be happening along State Street to realize that full vision. So as I mentioned, there were reasons for the State Street Transit operational analysis as to why we scheduled it. This outline, as was shared in your memo, just goes over kind of the history of how we got there. We began reviewing the work that's going on State Street back in 2018, identified the need for a focus team, the State Street executive team, to help overcome some of the challenges, some of the things that had become stalled on State Street, and identified a need to reassess these features in the transit operational analysis in 2019. We hired a consultant to conduct the TOA in 2021, and the following year, in April of 22, we used actually the findings of the TOA to create the RAISE grant that we submitted this calendar year. And then we completed the TOA. We presented the findings of the TOA to the to the VRT executive board in July. They accepted the findings in August. And then we presented the TOA findings again to the ACHD commission in September. And we're now in front of the Boise City Council to present the findings of the TOA with you all. The purpose here is to just going around to the different State Street MOU partners and helping them all understand the findings of the TOA and how it might impact future actions on State Street. Kind of already touched on the goals and objectives of the State Street operational analysis. Again, evaluating the purpose of the HOV lane, the performance of the HOV lanes, other alternatives to that, and the pullouts. All done from the perspective of how can we achieve the objectives that were in the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan with different applications that we could move forward more quickly. So quick background on the State Street corridor. Currently, there's a whole bunch of different widths as you move through the corridor from downtown out to Glenwood and beyond. And this is what was addressed in the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan, was how to standardize the corridor and make it a multimodal corridor. The T-top, as mentioned, envisioned 3 lanes in each directions, with the outside lane being HOV lanes, and on-street bike lanes and sidewalks, raised median. As we did the transit operational analysis, we compared 2 alternatives to that T-top vision. And the first alternative looked at 6 general purpose lanes, so removing the HOV lane restrictions, but instead of having bus pullouts, we had in-lane stops on that general purpose lane. We had enhanced transit priority lanes at major intersections. I'll show you an example of that in a second. And we also created a separated multi-use path. So instead of having both a sidewalk and an on-street bike lane, we moved the bike lane up the curb and created a multi-use path in both directions. So that was one of the alternatives. The second alternative was similar, 6 GP lanes, in-lane bus stops, but really focused on a targeted approach to transit priority. So where could we get the biggest bang for our buck on transit priority, as opposed to kind of corridor-wide lane treatments? Again, a separated multi-use path, no HOV lanes, no bus pullouts. An example of some of the kind of targeted treatments might be something like this, where it's a ride only except buses. This is already in place at 27th and in other locations across the valley. It helps transit move through the corridor. A queue jump actually creates a bus only lane in advance of an intersection. It helps say there was a line of cars approaching an intersection. If you had a queue jump, it allows the bus to get into a bus only lane, travel to the head of the line and move through the intersection that way. So those are two examples of the more advanced transit priority treatments that were explored in option 2. So what we found is that in fact, using in-lane bus stops that performed better for transit than using bus pullouts, and in-lane stops for general purpose traffic also performed better than the HOV restrictions on the entire lane. So 6 general purpose travel lanes with in-lane stops and transit priority performed better than the 2 general purpose with HOV lanes and bus pullouts, both for general purpose travel and for transit. It also provided an opportunity for us to, the TOA identified different opportunities where we could pilot transit priority treatments, especially as the corridor is built out, where we have sections maybe of 7 lanes that don't go all the way through, but we could use some of that excess capacity in the short term for transit priority. And then the project portfolio that was created and the TOA also generated opportunities for new partnerships. The best example of that being the RAISE grant and the projects that were included in that grant. So at each of the different locations, what we were looking to do is apply a whole slew of treatments at the stops that reduced dwell time, allowed the bus to minimize its impact both with traffic, but also to increase the speed of transit through the corridor. So minimizing delay for riders. So this included things, there were some stop consolidation or removing of a few stops that were close together on State Street, moving stops to the far side of the intersection, which allowed the bus to clear the intersection before making the stop, using in-lane stops and curb extensions as opposed to pulling the bus out of the lane of traffic, which in essence traps the bus off the street and causes a delay as the bus tries to get back on the road and traveling down the corridor. Actually having a higher curb from a 6-inch up to a 9-inch curb helps speed the loading and unloading of passengers, especially if there are any kind of mobility devices. So that reduces the dwell time or the amount of time that the bus is stopped at the bus stop. Moving bike facilities behind the bus stop instead of having them again on the road. So this is really what led to us creating that multi-use path out of the roadway. Is it lent itself really well to having those pedestrian and bicycle facilities behind the station as opposed to in between the bus and the roadway, which meant they call it leapfrogging. You'd have to cross the bus, or the bus would have to keep crossing the bike lane and creates conflict that way. We also looked at the types of amenities that could improve loading time. So off-board fare payment as opposed to people paying as they get on board the bus, which slows boarding, and then using all door boarding, so a longer platform allowing people to get on and off either door rather than everybody funneling off the front door. So included in that project portfolio was applying each of those different tools at the bus stops that were reviewed, looking at how we could make investments on both the existing right away as well as where there was still anticipated expansion for those 6th and 7th lanes. And we identified improvements at these 10 different locations. We were just talking about the stop at Bogart, in fact, with the fire station. And in fact, we are looking at doing some more design work there to identify the proper location of that bus stop. 5 of these locations were included in the RAISE grant, and we were able to coordinate with both ACHD, ITD, City of Boise to move that forward, and CCDC. So the next steps with this is we've been working through the State Street Transit team to lead a process that would formally acknowledge the State Street Transit operational analysis, the findings of that. And we're working on potentially updating what's in the T-top, particularly that cross section, and understanding what we're building in the future of whether that be 2 general purpose lanes with an HOV lane or 3 general purpose lanes with in-lane stops. That will be kind of the next big ask as we move with our partners through this process, identifying what we've found through the transit operational analysis, suggesting that in fact we can get these improvements done in this way, which will allow us to work with our partners to program and construct the rest of the State Street corridor as envisioned. And it also will allow us to continue to coordinate with our partners on opportunities to build out the rest of the project portfolio and the corridor. With that, I would stand for any questions. I appreciate the time.
Madam Mayor, when you say the consolidation of stops, are you talking about 2 stops that are next to each other? You're getting rid of one of them and you're putting them in one spot. Do you know how many you're talking about when we're talking about consolidating? Are there 5 spots that are getting rid of? Is there 10?
There were 2 to 3 stops or locations where we're looking at stop consolidation.
And then, Madam Mayor, just to follow up, I mean, certainly it's going to be cheaper when there's, less stops and you're having to build out fewer things. Are there reasons because of the need for the infrastructure? Is the reason for timing and trying to slow down complicated intersections? What are the reasons for the consolidation of those?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, the reason for stop consolidation is always this trade-off between speed and access. So when you're able to remove stops, you're able to speed up the transit flow. And so we were identifying locations where the stops were close together. And by removing a stop, you're able to consolidate or concentrate activity at fewer stops, which allows the service to run smoother through the corridor.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so just to follow up there. So this was based more on efficiency and speed more so than just cost.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yep.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Stephen. I have a question about the alternatives analysis that was done. It looks like the TOP ended up with attached bike lanes and then 6-foot sidewalks instead of doing multi-use paths. Can you kind of lead me through some of the conversation that went into that?
Sure, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, the TTOP, which was the document that was adopted in 2011, was what established that original cross section. That
Okay.
This one, and so this was 2011. Identified a 7-lane cross section with bike lanes and a sidewalk. What we did with the TOA, the transit operational analysis, was look at, again, that HOV lane, the pullouts, and the function of that bike lane. And that's where we made a recommendation for moving that from on-street to a multi-use path. Okay. So the transit operational analysis that we have just concluded, one of the things, to be quite clear, one of the things that we will be doing is suggesting an update to this cross section that would show 3 lanes of general purpose traffic with a multi-use path rather than the bike lane on the street, so that everybody's clear as to what that cross section looks like, as well as references to bus pullouts being replaced with in-lane stops.
That's great. Thank you. I was very confused. I was like, I thought that we did multi-use paths now. I thought that was the best practice. So it's nice to have that history that this was 2011. We've learned a lot of stuff since 2011. And so that's being updated. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thanks, Stephen. It's great to see this finally done. A couple of questions on details. The first one is that as we first initially talked about this, we talked about potentially moving from an HOV lane to a business access transit lane. I'm assuming there's not as much detail in these memos, frankly, as I wish there was, but I'm assuming what was found is that the use of those outside lanes will primarily be business access anyway, and that the through traffic will stay in the centermost lanes. And so we don't really have to designate it. We'll still get the travel time improvements. Is Am I reading that correctly?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, it wasn't explicitly modeled that way, but in essence, yes, there's friction in that outside lane for two reasons. One, because you've got people that are doing right-hand turns into businesses, and we also have the in-lane bus stops. But the finding was that friction was better for general purpose traffic than having an HOV lane there that further constrained the capacity of the corridor. So yes, if you are wanting to avoid the friction of waiting behind a bus stop or waiting behind a bus or waiting behind people that are turning rights, you would stay in those other two general purpose lanes.
Thank you. And I guess a little bit of follow-up on that. And in the future, as this gets built and we get experience with it, much like we're now analyzing changes from 2011, is it possible that we would find that we could restrict one of the lanes even further to improve bus time in that lane?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think anything is possible in the future. What we would be proposing at this time is that those would be general purpose lanes and the transit with the explicit kind of trade-off that we know that there will be cars that stop behind the bus because it's an in-lane stop. And that kind of friction is something that is a trade-off we're proposing to accept because it allows both transit and general purpose to perform better. As transit use grows in the corridor and as we're trying to further maximize throughput, I think those conversations about how we continue to prioritize that 6th and 7th lane would be for future conversations.
Okay. One other detail, you mentioned the near level boarding and you said 9 inches. Explain to us a little bit where 9 inches falls in terms of level boarding, near level boarding, and why it was chosen as the sweet spot, if you will.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yeah. So there's kind of two terms that often come up. There's level boarding, and then we're talking about near level boarding. And the reason that so we're talking about curb height. We're talking about a bus that's approaching the bus stop, and you can't go up, but you can go down. And so if we have different fleet types, or if you have maybe you've got, say, the Route 9 on State Street, but you have a different route also serving some of those stops, all those buses would have to have the same door height. And not every vehicle has exactly the same door height. And so we wanted the flexibility on the infrastructure side, the truly concrete side, to accommodate different door heights and different fleet types. And so 9 inches was as high as we could go that still provided the flexibility of various door heights. I would add to that as vehicles continue to evolve, being able to adjust the height of the door using hydraulics is something that can actually be programmed in as buses are approaching. And so as we're looking into the future, we're seeing it's probably better for us to work with that on the vehicle side as opposed to the infrastructure side, because you can't just push concrete up and down according to what bus is coming, but you can adjust that on the bus side. And Bree had a comment, if that would be okay.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I just wanted to add to your earlier comment about the travel lanes and the lane width that we have portrayed here. This, like I said at the beginning, is sort of one component of all of State Street, right? We have transit, but then we have our PDS team that serves on all of the project teams for the intersection improvements with ACHD and ITD and the actual, now I can't forget the term for it, but the straightaways between intersections that ACHD works on. So all of that ties together and makes up this whole vision for State Street, including the pathways that connect to it on the side pieces. So the lane width specifically is something we hope we can address with ACHD in further conversations about those interstitial pieces. That's the word.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate those queue jump lanes. I think that's the first time I've seen that proposed in the Boise region. I think it could be a game changer. My last question also has to do with the consolidated stops. I would like to see a map of those at some point. I couldn't find one in here. Maybe there is, where the stops are today and where we're proposing to consolidate them. I just want to understand it from a land use perspective and where we've got particularly higher density housing and or other destinations And I just was having a hard time reading what was being proposed versus what is.
Madam Mayor, Council President, our team also reviewed the stop consolidation during the RAISE grant. So we'll give you the RAISE grant packet and some of the concepts that were put together for that, because it showed a really good graphic of the stops that were being consolidated. And I guess that is another component of the State Street vision is, of course, the transit supported development pattern along State Street. So
Right.
that is all coming together to create just this transformational opportunity for State Street supported by transit.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd forgotten that we did that. So I didn't go back to look there for
We'll share it with
but
you. We'll share it with you again.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam Mayor, one more question. Excited to see the multi-use lanes going further away from traffic. I think we see all sorts of evidence from all around the world that that's kind of the thing that's going to get more people riding. Does that end up changing some of the intersection treatments as far as people on bikes being moved further away from the vehicles as far as line of sights go? Is there different types of intersection treatments or raised crossings that we end up having to do? Can you speak to any challenges or things that you've seen when you looked at that part of it?
Councilmember, yes, Councilmember Halliburton, the moving the bike lanes up the curb does create challenges in terms of visibility for traffic, particularly right turning traffic. There are different treatments at intersections. That much I can tell you. But how that is exactly applied at all the different intersections, I think is also still a bit TBD. It's also possible that you could go from kind of, a multi-use path that then transitions onto the roadway. This is particularly true if you have right turning traffic, like a right turn lane, and you're wanting to go straight, providing an opportunity for cyclists to be on the left of that right turn lane. I mean, some people are comfortable there, other people are not. So those are all the things that you try and balance with that infrastructure.
And Madam Mayor, just following up there, there's a lot of treatments that are out there. There's probably some that would work really well that are probably expensive, but also ones that we just haven't seen a lot in this city. So hopefully, as we're working with our different partners, we'll be able to see them adopt some of the newer standards that we haven't actually seen implemented a lot yet. Because I do think that they're out there. We just don't see them a lot quite yet here in Boise.
All right, I want to thank you both for coming and just say that the opportunity that the RAISE grant provides us to move ahead on this corridor is really quite remarkable. And I'm really excited and appreciate the work and partnership that VRT, the Transportation Department, our city staff, and so many others did to make that a reality. And that makes possible advancing some of these investments along State Street that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So thanks for coming to talk about the more technical nature of it, and really look forward to the impact that this will have on this corridor as we start to make the investments actually change the way things look and the experience, and most importantly, the experience that our residents have as they move back and forth.
Madam Mayor, before I make the motion on the executive session, I'd like to also note that, 20 some years on, it's pretty exciting to finally be at a point where we're going to build the real transit infrastructure on State Street and not just widen the road. And thank you to everyone who worked on figuring out this new way of operating on the road so that it can work the best possible for transit. Thanks. Madam Mayor, with that, I would move we go into executive session, personnel, land acquisition, records exempt from public disclosure, pending probable litigation, communication with risk management regarding pending probable claims, labor contract, Idaho Code 74-206 1B CD F I and J.
Second. We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings. Yes. Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.